Hello everyone, welcome to our session about phased project implementation, managing water one step at a time. My name is Bennett Euler. I am with Houston Engineering, and I'm joined as well today by Kim Melton with the Wilkin Soil and Water Conservation District. And today we are going to be talking about the Whiskey Creek Enhancement Project, which is located within the Buffalo-Red River Watershed District. So we're going to touch on a couple different things. We're going to go over the project background, how we got to where we are today. We'll talk about what went into the project development and the phased implementation. Kim is going to talk with us about landowner partnerships and how that's very important to getting these projects completed. And then at the end, we will take any questions that you may have. So where are we located? Like I mentioned, we're within the Buffalo-Red River Watershed District, but more specifically, we're within Wilkin County, which is located in west central Minnesota. And we are within the southern part of the Buffalo-Red River Watershed District. And so that red line represents the Whiskey Creek Watershed, which encompasses approximately 155 square miles, ranging from northeast of Rothsay all the way to the west to Kent, Minnesota. And Whiskey Creek itself sits on the western part of the watershed, and the upstream portion starts north of Breckenridge, and the creek flows to the north-northwest through Kent, Minnesota, where it outlets into the Red River of the North. So why Whiskey Creek? Why are we doing this project? Like all the projects that we do for the watershed, it's landowner driven. And so the landowners originally came to Wilkin County about 20 years ago and presented the issues that they were having and the problems that they noticed within their fields and just asked for help to solve these problems. And some of these problems included poor drainage and channel capacity, breakout flows across agricultural fields, and then also excessive erosion within the creek. And so touching on the poor drainage and channel capacity, we found as we got further into this project that was due to two things specifically, one of them being excess sediment that's built up within the stream, and then also the beaver dams that have been built over time within the stream itself, which is backing up water and causing those breakout flows that these landowners are seeing. Another reason why this project is so important is that it's been identified in the TMDL as being impaired for turbidity, and more specifically, it is shown that it requires up to a 29% reduction in the sediment loading in order to meet the TSS standards, and this equates to about 5,200 tons per year of sediment reduction that is needed within the Whiskey Creek watershed. So project development. At Houston, one of the first things that we did was go and collect data so we know what we're dealing with. And so we were able to take profiles within the stream about every 100 feet and also take cross sections about every 500 feet in order to gather some existing conditions data so we knew how to approach the situation. Another thing that we did was we took some sediment test pits within the creek, so we're able to determine the depth of sediment that's built up over time. And we found that it ranged anywhere from 1 to 3 feet on average throughout the entire system. We also got the stream crossings wherever there were culverts or bridges, and we identified those beaver dams that I was talking about so we knew where they were located. And then the last thing that we did was survey and identify any of the gully washout locations within the fields adjacent to the creek. In total, there were over 12,000 points that were collected, and so it was quite the effort by our survey team to get this completed. Next was with the channel geometry. So this project will use a two-stage design with the goal of mimicking the natural stream conditions in order to try and restore Whiskey Creek back to a stable stream. What I mean by a stable stream is a waterway that does not lose sediment over time, but also does not gain sediment over time. And so it's kind of self-maintaining, and it was able to maintain its natural geometry as we go forward in time. And so this image is an example from above of what a meandering two-stage channel will look like. So the blue lines represent your valley footprint, with the red line representing your low flow channel as it winds through that valley. And this design was done really with the direct input and help from both the DNR and Bowser, which we found to be really helpful as we went through with this project, to be able to bring partners to the table on the front end, talk through the project, get ideas from each other. It really helps as you advance further down the line, specifically into the permitting stage where everybody's on the same page, there really aren't any surprises, and it really helps streamline the process as you go through it. So this is a typical channel section of what a two-stage ditch looks like. And so as I mentioned, that low flow meandering channel is in the bottom, and the bank full width as shown for this project varies anywhere from 14 to 22 feet depending on where you are within the system, and will have a depth of anywhere from 2.5 to 4 feet deep. And so this low flow meandering channel is designed with the intention of handling approximately a 1.5 year flood event. And then the valley footprint, which was shown by the blue lines in the previous slide, is estimated to be anywhere between 100 and 170 feet wide for this project. The next thing we looked at was any side inlet pipes that would need to be installed as part of the project. And this goes back to the gully locations that we identified. And it is combined with using stream power index in the office to try and determine where are the areas of concentrated flow throughout the system. So here's an example of what the stream power index looks like. And so as you can see, the areas shown in red are areas where there's high levels of concentrated flow. And we're able to use that to compare it to the field data that we got and see how everything matches up. And we're also able to compare that to aerial photos just to kind of overlay everything, make sure that the areas that we're seeing in the field match the areas that we're seeing with our computer systems in the office. And so we know where we need to install these pipes going forward. And this is a typical section of what a side inlet looks like, as well as some before and after photos. So on the bottom left, you can see where erosion has really cut up into the farm field and a lot of sediment has been deposited within the stream. And on the right side, we have an after photo of what a side inlet looks like. And the goal is really to establish and maintain the grade upstream of the culvert within the field going forward, while also helping to eliminate the excess sediment that gets deposited within the creek. So the next part of project development was permitting. So this is a list of the permits that we will be applying for or have already received as part of the project. And in general, the amount of permits for Whiskey Creek really isn't that unique. These permits are pretty basic, especially when you're working within a public water for other projects. But what really did make this project unique is its total length. So when you're talking about restoring over 9 miles of channel, there's a lot of different variables that go into that. One of the big ones being the wetlands that you're dealing with. So this is an image just showing an example within section 10 of Connolly Township on the upstream part of our project of some wetlands based on the National Wetland Inventory. And so where this comes into play is when we're working with our Wetland Conservation Act partners to determine what we need to do for the project and how we're going to mitigate for any wetland impacts. We need to quantify the area of them and then determine what steps we need to take. And so it was determined based on Whiskey Creek and the benefits that it will provide that we have a no loss for this project, meaning that any wetlands that we impact will be mitigated by increased wetlands provided through the project. And two other areas that we had to address with this project were completing an environmental assessment worksheet, also known as an EAW, and completing an archaeological survey along the whole corridor of Whiskey Creek. And this was done for a couple reasons. We want to make sure that the project that we're doing is not adversely affecting whether that be environmental resources or the cultural resources for past settlements that could have taken place adjacent to the creek. But they also needed to be done as conditions to receive our permits. And so it kind of all worked hand in hand. Project implementation. This project was approached basically in different phases. And so the first phase we'll call phase 0, and this was completed between 2009 and 2015. And the second portion is what we plan to have happen in the future. And so the goal is to have phases 1 through 4 completed over the course of the next 4 construction seasons. However, a lot of that is driven based off of what we have available for funding each year. And we'll get into that more as we go along. So phase 0, what did that entail? So what we did was we completed ditch retrofits throughout the county ditch systems within Whiskey Creek Watershed. And we did that by installing side inlets at areas of concentrated flow and where there were existing washouts and gullies, and also to expand the buffers within those systems as well. And so in total, there are over 45 miles of ditch retrofits that we completed, which really helps set the stage for future projects to come, because when you're able to take care of the sediment on the upstream part of the watershed, you're able to then proceed downstream, clean out the channel, and not have to worry about the sediment continuing to be flushed through on the upstream side. The other part of phase 0 that was completed was a pilot program to give the landowners an idea of what this project will look like. And so in section 14 of Connolly Township, which is on the upstream part of Whiskey Creek, we completed a 1-mile restoration that reestablished the grade line and excavated pools at the outside bends to help improve the habitat, and really to give the landowners an in-person view of what we are proposing for this project and how it will work. This was really beneficial not only for us, but also for other local government units to be able to help sell this project to the landowners to show them the benefits and to give them an idea of what it's going to look like when it's all finished. So another facet of this project was to install any side inlet pipes at areas of concentrated flow, as well as establish the vegetated buffer along the corridor. And this was all completed in the fall of 2014. This is an example of this project. So it shows in red, like I was talking about, the areas where along the outside bends of the channel, those were where the deeper pools were excavated to help improve the habitat within the area. So next we have the future phases of Whiskey Creek. On the right-hand side, we have an image showing approximately the boundaries that we are anticipating to complete the project in. And you may ask, why 4 phases? Why the boundaries that you have shown? And that's a great question. And really it comes down to 2 things. One being, where is a logical point to stop our project? As we're working with a creek and meandering our way through different sections of fields, we want to make sure that we're tying into an area that is fixed. So for example, we don't want to stop in the middle of a farm field. We really would prefer to tie into field crossings that exist within the area. And the second part of that, as far as the footprint that is determined, is what money is available to pay for these projects. And that's where the project funding comes into play. And so as part of this project, we've received a couple different sources of funding. And so from the federal aspect, we've gotten 319 funds through the MPCA, and we also received a National Water Quality Initiative grant through the NRCS. And then with the CREP program, which is both federal and state funds, we plan on using that money in order to secure the permanent conservation easement along the corridor of Whiskey Creek, where we are going to be completing the restoration. We also received some state funds through the DNR, Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council, as well as clean water funds through Bowser. And lastly, we'll have some local funds available. So the plan is to hopefully establish a water management district sometime this winter. And then there's also the district-wide levy funds available through the Buffalo-Red River Watershed District. And so back to the phasing of the project, the grant that really drove the 4 phases for Whiskey Creek was the NWQI grant. And this was because how the grant was laid out and how the money is going to come in, it's over a 4-year period from the 2021 to 2024 construction seasons. And so looking at the money that we're going to get each year and trying to maximize the available funding to us, it really made the most sense to break this project up into 4 phases. So here's an example of phase 1 that we are proposing, showing the valley footprint and also the low flow meandering channel throughout sections 9 and 10 of Connolly Township. So what are the project benefits when we are all done? One of the things that will be done is have over 200 sediment BMPs, or the side inlets, installed throughout both Whiskey Creek and its tributaries. We will also have established over 700 acres of permanent conservation easement buffers, which will help improve the habitat within the watershed. And we will be restoring over 9 miles of Whiskey Creek back to its stable condition. And finally, we'll be reducing the sediment loading to help us achieve our goal as established in the TMDL. So this is an example of what the project will look like when it's finished. This is the Wolverton Creek restoration, which is located just north of Whiskey Creek throughout both Wilkin County and Clay County. So now I'm going to hand it off to Kim to talk to us about landowner involvement.
Thank you, Bennett. For landowner involvement with Whiskey Creek, the landowner meetings actually started about 2 decades ago. The landowners were leaning on the county to help with clearing beaver dams and trees, and soon realized that they had much bigger problems than just some temporary relief from the county. So more recently, the Buffalo-Red River Watershed District, along with the Wilkin Soil and Water Conservation District, held a meeting for the landowners along Whiskey Creek to gather their thoughts about a channel restoration project similar to the one that was going on about 20 miles to the north on Wolverton Creek. These landowner meetings is an important step to starting any project, because these projects need to be driven by the landowners, and having them on board and pushing a project is a big key to their success. So at this meeting, when the landowners told us they were very eager for a project that would look like Wolverton, we knew we were going down the right path. When working with landowners, I feel it's best to be upfront and honest, walking them through that whole process, letting them know what to expect and what the outcome is going to look like is going to help you push these projects through. Some people have the big meeting and invite everybody in the watershed area and let them know what's going on, but the way we approached it was having a smaller meeting, go with the landowners that were in that phase, and then that provides a more personable atmosphere with a smaller crowd. They're more apt to ask questions, they're comfortable, they'll voice their concerns, and then that also gives you that time to have that one-on-one with them. You can pull up their maps, sit down with them, ask them how they really feel about the project. How does this look on your landscape? Do you have worries about it? Get that one-on-one time that I feel is really valuable with them to make sure that project fits their landscape and what they feel would be necessary on their land. So that kind of goes back to making sure that you are providing them with a realistic timeline. We know what it's like to chase grant money, but they don't. You got to make sure that they know, like, this project isn't going to happen overnight. Just because we all agree on this doesn't mean that it's going to start construction next year. So making sure that when you sit down with them, you're giving them all the information they need so that you paint that picture of what the project's going to look like, the timeline, the cost estimates, and don't be afraid to ask them questions, because asking them questions kind of gets them comfortable with it too, because it gets them to speak and open up a little bit. In the end, it's their investment, so you want to be sure that they support the project. So asking questions, I feel, is important. Not everyone is comfortable meeting in an office setting, so if you are going to meet with these landowners, don't be scared to go out and meet with them in the field or on the tailgate or in the shop. That's where they tend to be more comfortable and they'll open up more. But when you do go meet with them, be sure you have all your information gathered, because your pitch is important to them. You got to make sure that you're selling that project. You're explaining the importance of that meander in the channel. You're sharing with them the benefits, not just to them, but to the neighbors and the longevity of the project. Having landowner participation to help maximize available funding is a key role in getting a project implemented. If you don't have a landowner who supports it, who sees the benefits, they're going to be more hesitant to sign up for your programs. An example is with the NWQI money. They have to sign an NRCS application for this funding, and so you're asking them to solely sign on that line and be responsible for the project on their land, and that can make them nervous. So explain to them, reiterating that this project is as a whole. It is not just you. Your neighbors are signing up. It's going to help sell this project and get them more comfortable with signing that application. And then collaborating on permanent easements, and that can be tough too, because the word easement alone can scare them. So getting them comfortable with the project and the scope, and that the corridor needs to be here permanently for the benefit of the project in the long run, is going to help that transition into that easement a little more less scary. And then meeting them on site in the field and helping form that so that it benefits them on how they're farming will also help get that easement in place and reassure them that this project as a whole, it's going to benefit everybody in the long run. We're lucky enough to have these awesome landowners in Wilkin County that have learned of these projects, and they've seen the history of the Buffalo-Red and the Wilkin Soil and Water in the past complete these successful projects on the landscape, and they're the ones really pushing for these projects and willing to support us and help us get this work done. So without them, we don't have a project.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. So that is all that we have for today. So we will now take any questions that you may have. And also, if you would like to contact us directly, we have our contact info shown here on the screen. So feel free to email either myself or Kim directly with any questions that you may have. So thank you all very much for your time.